It's a message you may have heard from a pulpit or on a television broadcast, spoken with sincere conviction and passion. The idea that the nation of Israel holds a special favored place in the heart of God is a belief deeply rooted in certain Christian traditions. Proponents often point to powerful verses from the Old Testament as evidence of this unique relationship. They might read from Deuteronomy, where God tells the Israelites, "For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possession." This language of being chosen and a treasured possession certainly sounds like favoritism, doesn't it? It's easy to see how one could build a strong case from these ancient words. This belief isn't just built on a few isolated verses. It's woven into the grand narrative of the Old Testament. The story begins with a promise made to one man, Abraham. God called him out of his homeland and promised to make his descendants into a great nation, a nation through which all other peoples on earth would be blessed. This covenant, passed down through Isaac and Jacob, forms the very foundation of Israel's identity. From the dramatic rescue from slavery in Egypt to the giving of the law on Mount Sinai, the story is one of God intervening directly on behalf of this specific group of people. It is a beautiful and powerful story of faithfulness. And for many, it cements the idea that Israel is, and always will be, God's favorite. When we look at these scriptures, it's understandable why someone would conclude that God plays favorites. The language is specific, the promises are grand, and the historical accounts are focused on the journey of one nation. For centuries, people have read these texts and felt a deep connection to the story of Israel, seeing it as the central thread in God's divine plan for humanity. The idea gives them a framework for understanding history and prophecy, a lens through which world events can be interpreted. It seems to provide a clear answer to the question of where God's allegiance lies in a complicated and often confusing world, offering a sense of order and divine purpose to the unfolding of history. However, we must be careful not to stop reading there. The Bible is a vast and rich library of books, and the story doesn't end with the Old Testament promises. If we only focus on the parts that speak of Israel as a chosen nation, we risk missing the broader, more inclusive picture of God's love that unfolds throughout the scriptures. It's like reading only the first half of a wonderful novel and thinking you know the ending. The story of God's heart is much bigger than we can imagine, and his plan of blessing was never meant to be confined to a single group of people or a single piece of land. The promise to Abraham himself contained the seed of a global blessing. To say that God is partial or that he plays favorites with nations is to misunderstand the very essence of his character. It is, with all respect, a human idea that we place upon a divine being. We think in terms of teams, of us versus them, but God does not. The Apostle Peter had a profound revelation about this very topic. After being sent to the home of a Roman centurion named Cornelius, a man who was not a Jew, Peter declared, "I now realize how true it is that God does not show favoritism, but accepts from every nation the one who fears him and does what is right." This was a groundbreaking moment, a realization that the walls people had built between themselves did not exist in the heart of God. His love was not exclusive, it was radically inclusive. The entire New Testament echoes this theme of universal love. The Apostle Paul, who once prided himself on his Jewish heritage, wrote powerfully in his letter to the Galatians, "There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." This is a revolutionary statement. It dismantles the very categories that we use to divide ourselves. In God's family, nationality, social status, and gender do not determine our value or our access to his grace. His invitation is open to everyone, everywhere. To suggest that God favors one nation over another contradicts this beautiful and foundational truth of the Christian faith. God's family is not defined by a passport, but by a heart turned toward him. Think of God as a loving father with many children. Does a good father love one of his children more than the others? Of course not. He may have a unique relationship with each child based on their individual personalities and needs, but his love is constant and equally available to all. The story of Israel in the Old Testament is not about God choosing a favorite child. Rather, it is the story of how this loving Father chose one family to be the vehicle through which he would reveal his plan of salvation to all his children. Israel was meant to be a beacon of light, a showcase of God's faithfulness, so that the whole world would see and be drawn to him. Their role was one of service, not of superiority. Therefore, while the Bible clearly speaks of a special covenant with the people of Israel, it is a misunderstanding to frame it as divine favoritism. This covenant was part of a larger, unfolding plan of redemption for all of humanity. The promises were real, and the relationship was unique, but it was always with a global purpose in mind. The ultimate goal was never to elevate one nation above all others, but to create a path for every person from every nation to find their way back to God. God's heart has always been for the entire world he created, and his love knows no borders or boundaries. He is the God of all people. There is a fascinating moment in the Gospels when some religious leaders try to trap Jesus with a political question. They asked if it was right to pay taxes to Caesar, the Roman emperor who occupied their land. It was a clever trap. If he said yes, he would appear to be a traitor to his own people. If he said no, he could be arrested for rebellion against Rome. Jesus' response was brilliant in its simplicity and profound in its wisdom. He asked for a coin, pointed to the emperor's image on it and said, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." In that one sentence, he drew a clear line between the claims of earthly power and the claims of our Creator. This teaching is incredibly relevant for us today. It reminds us that our political and national identities are separate from our spiritual allegiance. Governments, borders, and political systems belong to the realm of Caesar. They are human institutions, temporary and flawed. Our ultimate loyalty, our deepest identity, belongs to God. When we confuse these two realms, we run into trouble. We start to believe that God is on our political side, that our nation's interests are the same as God's interests. We wrap our flag around the cross, and in doing so, we shrink God down to the size of a political mascot. But God refuses to be claimed by any political party or any single nation. His kingdom is not of this world. Applying this wisdom to modern conflicts, like the heart-wrenching situation between Israelis and Palestinians, is essential. For decades, this conflict has been fueled by political, territorial, and historical grievances. It is a deeply human and earthly struggle over land, security, and justice. To claim that God is unequivocally on one side is to ignore Jesus' teaching. It is to take a Caesar problem, a problem of borders, government, and military action, and incorrectly label it as a God problem. This approach only deepens the division and makes true peace harder to find. Because if God is on your side, any compromise can feel like a betrayal of faith. It prevents us from seeing the humanity on the other side of the wall. Instead, Jesus' wisdom invites us to step back and see the situation through a different lens. We can and should engage in the political process, advocate for justice, and pray for peace. These are Caesar's realm, but our faith calls us to a higher standard. It calls us to recognize that God's heart breaks for all who are suffering. He weeps for the Israeli families who have lost loved ones and live in fear of violence. He weeps for the Palestinian families who have lost their homes, their children, and their hope in the midst of a devastating humanitarian crisis. Our faith should not lead us to choose a side in the conflict, but to choose compassion for every person caught in its tragic grip. In the end, the belief that God has a favorite nation is not only a misreading of Scripture, but also a disservice to the character of God. It paints him as a tribal deity, a celestial king who picks winners and losers in the geopolitical arena. But that is not the God revealed in Jesus Christ. The God of the Bible is a father who loves every single person he has made, regardless of their nationality or political affiliation. He does not see an Israeli or a Palestinian. He sees a child created in his image. He feels the pain of every mother, whether she lives in Tel Aviv or Gaza. His love is not a limited resource to be distributed among nations. It is an infinite ocean of grace available to all. To use faith as a weapon to justify political claims or to dehumanize another group of people is to fundamentally misunderstand its purpose. As we witness the ongoing tragedy in the Middle East, With staggering loss of life and a humanitarian crisis that has left millions displaced and on the brink of famine, our faith should not lead us to declare God's allegiance. Instead, it should compel us to act with love and mercy. It should move us to pray for the peacemakers, to support those who are providing aid to the suffering, and to mourn with all who mourn. This is how we honor God, not by choosing a side, but by reflecting His compassionate heart to a world in desperate need of it. The challenge for us is to hold on to the truth that God's kingdom operates on a different set of principles than the kingdoms of this world. Earthly kingdoms are built on power, defined by borders, and defended with weapons. God's kingdom is built on love, defined by grace, and advanced through acts of service and sacrifice. In God's kingdom, there are no favorites. The first are last, the last are first, and the greatest are those who serve others. This is a radical and countercultural message, and it is the only message that offers true and lasting hope for peace in our broken world. Let us, therefore, resist the temptation to enlist God in our political battles. Let us refuse to believe that He loves one nation more than another. Instead, let us look at the world and its conflicts with the eyes of our Father. Let us see every person as a beloved child of God, worthy of dignity, respect, and peace. For it is only when we recognize our shared humanity and our equal standing before a loving Creator that we can begin to build bridges of understanding and work toward a future where all of God's children can flourish. God does not have a favorite nation. He has a favorite creation, and it is called humanity.